here are the things that we're going to cover today. We're targeting the topic of positive reinforcement because it's a high yield strategy that's going to give you quick results in your classroom when you implement it correctly and consistently, which you'll be able to do by the end of this training. There are not many magic tricks in our field, but this is one of those things that is kind of like a magic trick. If you use it, it works and you see the results very quickly. One of the top requests we get from teachers is how to handle challenging behavior in the classroom, which is the reason why we chose this topic. Today, we'll learn about positive reinforcement and why it's important. We'll tell you how to implement it and give you some additional strategies to support implementation.
So as Daylene said, today we are going to talk about positive reinforcement. But before we jump into positive reinforcement, I want to make sure that we all have the same definition of behavior. When people think of behavior, often they think of bad, negative, or challenging behaviors. However, behavior is something that we do all day, every day. It's something that we can observe, we can measure it, and we can repeat it. So not only can we look at reducing challenging behaviors, we can look at increasing those behaviors that we want to see grow, such as sitting or, maybe raising a hand. So as we go through this training today, I encourage you to take a moment, grab a pen, pencil, piece of paper, and think of a student that perhaps you have struggled to connect with or whose behavior you've struggled to change. And as we're talking, you can write down any notes that come to mind. If there are any specific strategies we discussed that might be helpful, write those down and you'll have something to start off with after the training's over. This might sound a little bit jargony, but in a nutshell, what we're looking at today is how to build positive working relationships. And positive reinforcement is a key component to building those positive working relationships. So what is positive reinforcement? In essence, positive reinforcement is the addition of something good. So you're going to add something. That's where you're going to get your plus. And it's immediately following engagement in a desired behavior. And so the teacher will be choosing that desired behavior. So I have an example here. The example we are going to use is this little girl, and I'm going to ask her to write her name on her paper. Now, this is just an example. It could be anything. You could ask her to do a problem, 5 problems, raise their hand, turn in their work on time, share an item, sit in their chair. The sky's the limit. But for today's example, we're going to do putting her name on the paper. And I am going to add a reinforcer. Again, that's where we're going to get our positive plus for positive reinforcement. And she wants this gold sticker that she has on her dress in the second picture. And the increase in desired behavior would be next time we presented our worksheet, she sat down and wrote her name immediately because she remembered getting that gold sticker, the gold star sticker, and she wanted to get more gold star stickers. We are inferring in this example that she's really motivated by gold star stickers. So a real life example that everyone can connect to is working. You go to work, you do your job, and you get paid. And then you keep going to work every day so that you keep getting that paycheck. So let's break that down like we did the little girl. So the desired behavior, probably set by your employer, is that you go to work and you do your job. You're going to add a reinforcer, and that's your paycheck. Everybody wants to get paid. And then you are going to see an increase or maintenance in the desired behavior, which is you keep going to work because you want to keep getting that paycheck. So you might be thinking, well, wait a minute, I'm not going to bribe my students to do something that they should already be doing. We sometimes hear that from teachers. And I have good news. Positive reinforcement is not bribery. Think back to the paycheck example. Do you consider your paycheck bribery? I sure don't consider my paycheck bribery. But let's consider the example of the little girl. She didn't get her sticker until after she put her name on her paper. So she's put her name on her paper, and I've given her a gold star sticker. Now, if I had given her the sticker and then said, okay, now go put your name on your paper, that would be a bribe. So there's a small difference here, but it's a big deal. So if the behavior happens before the expected behavior, before they get their item, it's positive reinforcement. If the expected behavior happens after they get their item, it's bribery. And we are not talking about bribery today. It's all about positive reinforcement. So now we kind of have a silly video example. If you've watched The Big Bang Theory, then you may have seen this. But before we watch, I want you to put on your behavior hats and think about positive reinforcement as you're watching this clip.
You hear a lot now.
Oh, am I talking too much? I'm sorry. Zip.
Thank you. Chocolate?
Yes, please. Oh, hey, Kim. Yeah, you know what? Hold on. Let me take this in the hall. You'll never guess who they got to replace you at work.
Okay. I know what you're doing.
Really?
Yes. You're using chocolates as positive reinforcement for what you consider correct behavior.
Very good. Chocolate?
No, I don't want
Okay. Like I said, that's just a fun little example. Okay. So let's think about positive reinforcement after watching that video. Was Sheldon using positive reinforcement? Absolutely. He is adding chocolate, there's your plus, when Penny stops talking or she takes her conversation anywhere. So he hasn't given her the expected behavior directly. He has decided those in his own mind and is expecting her, using to change her behavior. So it's a little different than we would use it in the classroom, but it's a fun example. So you might be thinking, this sounds like a lot of work. Why would I want to use this in my classroom? Good news, I have the answer. The first thing I want to talk about is encouraging positive behaviors. So positive reinforcement is a great strategy if you want to encourage positive behaviors. It's important to reinforce those positive behaviors that you want to see. People go out of their way to get good things. Think back to that girl completing or putting her name on the paper to get that gold star. She kept going back and putting her name on her paper because she wanted to keep getting that sticker. You keep getting up and going to work because you want to keep getting your paycheck. So positive reinforcement fosters a positive working relationship with the person or the people that you are getting good things from. For some of our students with significant disabilities or with the most significant disabilities, they may not have as many opportunities for success as everyone else. And we want to make sure that we're working hard as teachers to make that opportunity happen for them. Positive reinforcement is a way to get you there and really help your students have that feeling of success. And my favorite reason is that positive reinforcement is a high yield teaching strategy. It is a powerful tool for teaching students, just like Daleen told you earlier. And the really cool thing is you can teach anything from behaviors to academics to social skills using positive reinforcement. And there's an added bonus. When you focus on the behaviors that you want to see, you're also teaching them what you want them to do. So when we focus on the behaviors we don't want to see, you're not telling them what to do instead. Positive reinforcement helps you kind of switch your focus and focus on those positive desired behaviors. So for an example, I have a 3-year-old at home that has discovered picking his nose And sadly, his 18-month-old brother also thinks like brother does everything great and wants to do it too. I'm going to tell him myself, when he first started doing that, I was saying, don't pick your nose. I can say, don't pick your nose 100 times, but I'm not telling him what to do instead. And a 3-year-old's probably not going to figure that out. I mean, he might wipe it on his clothes. I don't really want him to do that either, or the furniture. So after a day of that, I caught myself and I was like, oh my goodness, what are you doing? So then when I saw him, I started saying, get a tissue. And when I modeled it, I helped him get a tissue. And then when he goes to do it himself, I'm really providing positive reinforcement, telling him what a great job he's doing getting a tissue, and then giving him something else that he finds reinforcing. And now he gets a tissue when he has something in his nose that he wants to remove. But let's think about that in the classroom context. So when you focus on the student doing the expected behavior, it's not only helping that student know what you want them to do, it's modeling for all the other students in the classroom. And it's cueing any student that's making a poor choice to change and do it this other way. So what can you teach using positive reinforcement? Reinforcers can be used with a variety of evidence-based strategies to strengthen a variety of skills and behaviors for children with and without disabilities. So this can include behaviors and many other skills and areas of development. So you can look at teaching social emotional skills. You could teach them to ask for help, show empathy, listen, pay attention. You could work on fine or gross motor skills, cutting with scissors, engaging in a physical activity, maybe on the playground or in PE. You can work on communication skills, teaching them to ask for a turn with a toy or initiate conversations with peers. That's a big one. Life skills, washing hands, toileting, following school rules, waiting in line. Behavior. So maybe taking turns in a game, exhibiting self-control, asking for a turn with a toy. And then also any of those challenging behaviors that you do not want to see, positive reinforcement can help you teach those replacement behaviors instead of those challenging behaviors. And then of course, academic skills. So perhaps you want to teach them to pick up a pencil, hold a book, identify correct phonemes, or answer comprehension or math questions. I could have started with this and just said, you know, everything, but I wanted to make sure that you had a lot of examples moving forward. So now let's talk about a reinforcer. We've been talking about positive reinforcement. A reinforcer is an item, activity, person that is motivating. So if the student really likes their chosen reinforcer, they're much more likely to respond to you in a positive way. And you'll be able to tell if they don't like their item or if they don't consider it reinforcing. They're less likely to do the activity or task that you've asked them to do. So let's look at this image on the screen. There's a little girl, there's a lady, and they are playing with toys. So perhaps the child finds the toy motivating. Perhaps the child finds the adult attention and interaction that she's getting motivating, or perhaps it's both. It could be both. So let's look at some examples of reinforcers. And this is a small list of examples. There are many, many reinforcers out there, and sometimes it's not what you expect. So we have toys. Any variety of toy could be a reinforcer. You could have candy. It doesn't have to be candy. It could be a goldfish cracker or any kind of savory item. I had a student once that was motivated by yogurt. It could be juice or any variety of drink. It could be adult attention. It might be a specific adult, or perhaps they don't care. It's any adult. Same with peers. Sometimes it's a specific peer, or sometimes it's any peer that's around. They're cool with that. Electronics are a big hit. Everyone likes an iPad. Well, not everyone, but most kids like an iPad and some variety of game or activity on the iPad. And then you have activities. Now, sometimes those will overlap with electronics or toys. We have swinging here and then playing a video game. So these are just a few examples. How will you choose a reinforcer for your student? So it's important to remember that finding reinforcers is about what the student finds reinforcing and not what the adult finds reinforcing. So if you pick something that you think they might like because every other kid in your class likes it, that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work. They have to like it enough to be willing to work for it to serve as a reinforcer. So we have a few ideas of how you can discover those reinforcers. You can do an interview or a checklist, observations, and there are trial-based methods. And we have friends at the Arkansas Behavior Support Specialist. They also have videos that are helpful with the topics of reinforcement and preference assessments. So if you look in our resources, there's a link in the videos that we think would be helpful concerning positive reinforcement. These are all preference assessments. So let's look at some different options for you. So you'll notice that I call these preference assessments, even though some of these titles say reinforcer. We use the term preference because we will not know if the item's actually reinforcing until we see the student working for it or not working for it to know if it's going to be a reinforcer. So that's why we use the term preference, and you might see reinforcer on some of these. That's okay. We did not create these resources. We aggregated them from other highly reputable and really helpful websites, but they're all linked on this document. If you go into our resources, you'll be able to find this slide and the next slide, and all of the links are hyperdoc. It's a hyperdoc. The links are live. You can click them and go to the document. If there is a video button, that means there are video examples that you can click on and go watch on YouTube. So most teachers begin with observations or perhaps an interview. Many teachers will send home a form at the beginning of the school year and ask parents to help. And then while they're waiting, they'll do observations, or maybe they do some of these forms on their own. So these really are going to help you narrow down what type of item your student might prefer. Some of these can be used as an observation or an interview. Some of these can be used as self-report if the student's capable of doing a self-report document. The point is that these are all great ways to gather information on what your student might like. If you see that it says it's an interview, but you send it home in the backpack and the parent fills it out and sends it back, so you didn't actually interview them, that's okay. You're still getting ideas of what your student might like. Most of these have directions of how to use them on the top when you click on the link, so you'll have all of that information. And then the key here that I want to talk about is that sometimes you will get assessments back from parents and it will say like, oh, well, he likes everything. Like there's nothing he doesn't like. Or you'll get an assessment back and they'll say, well, he doesn't like anything. There's like, I can't find anything that he'll work for, or they list one item. Well, first, everyone has reinforcers, so we don't give up there. Sometimes it takes more work to discover them. Sometimes it is something that you would never dream of being a reinforcer for someone, and that's okay. If it's motivating to them and it's socially appropriate and, you know, it's not something that's inappropriate to have at school, let them work for it. Both of those responses, they like everything, they don't like anything, or only one thing, are they make it a little bit difficult to move forward, knowing what to use with the student. So if that happens, we have some more structured methods on the next slide that I want to talk about. Another thing you can do is before you start your work session, do a quick check. If you have their choice board and they do not want anything on the choice board, then it's time to stop, drop, and assess. So gather some other items, let them interact with them for a few minutes, see if there's anything that they're interested in. If there is something, that's awesome, use that item. And then you can start adding it into their reinforcer choice board and you're expanding their reinforcers. If they don't like anything, put those down, go get another round and bring it over and try some more. I make it super fun and engaging, let them interact and keep trying new things. The big point is don't give up. Everyone has a reinforcer. Okay, so now we have some more structured preference assessments. These are fantastic because they will create a hierarchy of their most to least preferred items. You want to make this a super fun activity for them. We have video examples for all of them, and you can go watch before you get started, but make sure that they have time to play with the items before you start the actual trials and they get a sense of like what the toy does and, you know, get some interest in it before you start. The first option is a single stimulus preference assessment. This would be good for a student that cannot choose between two items. So that could be that they only scan, they don't scan. They look at one item and they don't move their head to look at anything else. Or perhaps they always choose the item on the left or they always choose the item on the right. You don't know if they really like it or if they're just choosing it because it's in that spot. So if the student has those characteristics, the single stimulus would be a great choice to start with. If a student can scan two items and they can select between two items, a paired stimulus would be a great choice because it's two items at a time. A multiple stimulus with replacement means that you're going to put the item back every trial. So it's always going to be a field of 6 if you're doing 6 items. You would use this if a student can scan multiple items up to 6, if they can select between those multiple items, but when you take one of the items out, they have challenging behavior. So you want to keep putting those 6 items in. That's what with replacement means. And so that would be your go-to if they have challenging behavior during a preference assessment. And then our last option is the most efficient. It is multiple stimulus without replacement. So you might start with the field of 6. When you do your first trial and you take one out, the next trial, you have a field of 5 and so forth. So if your student can scan 6 items, if they can select between them, and they do not engage in any challenging behavior when the toys are moved, this is the quickest and most efficient method to get your hierarchy.
Okay, we're going to talk about building relationships. Have you ever heard the quote by Theodore Roosevelt? They don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. Hopefully that quote will have a little deeper meaning as we go through this section. We often hear and we talk about as teachers building relationships, but what exactly does that mean? We're going to dive a little bit deeper and find out. So why are building relationships important? I could sit here and tell you about it, but instead I'm going to rely on this TED Talk by Rita Pierson. I was going to say my friend Rita Pierson, because I feel like once you watch her and you really connect with her, that you feel like you know her. Rita has a rich background in education and her TED Talk is well worth watching. We're only going to watch a minute or 2 of this one, but you can go on the internet and find it and watch the whole thing. So we'll start the video and I hope you find her as inspiring as we have.
But one of the things that we never discuss or we rarely discuss is the value and importance of human connection, relationships. James Comer says that no significant learning can occur without a significant relationship. George Washington Carver says all learning is understanding relationships. Everyone in this room has been affected by a teacher or an adult. For years, I have watched people teach. I have looked at the best and I've looked at some of the worst. A colleague said to me one time, they don't pay me to like the kids. They pay me to teach a lesson. The kids should learn it. I should teach it. They should learn it. Case closed. Well, I said to her, you know, kids don't learn from people they don't like.
Okay, so as Rita said it, relationships are vital. It's important that our students feel like we like them and feel like they have a relationship with us in order to get them to where we want them to be, in order for learning to take place. So I'm going to tell you a quick story about a student that I had. Her name was Addison. She came to me in the 2nd grade. She transferred from another school. And I knew before she came to me from talking to that teacher, and we knew that this transition was going to happen, I knew that there were some challenging behaviors. It was clear that she had a hard time developing relationships with the people in her school. By the time she came to me, her previous teacher and the peers in that classroom, they were scared of her. There was a lot of physical aggression, very tough kiddo, a lot of challenging behaviors. So I knew from the beginning, I had a little bit of insight that we were really going to need to work on building a relationship. And when she first came to my classroom, I couldn't ask her to do academic tasks. If I had started with academic demands, the behavior immediately began. And I tried at first to see, you have to get an idea to see how far you can go and what you can ask and what you can get. But really starting with building a relationship was where we started. And at first I could give her an activity that she liked to do. She had a lot of reinforcers. That wasn't very difficult to figure out with her. But one of the things she liked to do was put together a little 24-piece My Little Pony puzzle. She really liked My Little Pony. And so at first I could sit near her while she did the puzzle, but I couldn't sit very close to her because she didn't want me very close. But over time, I could sit a little bit closer to her and then help her complete the puzzle to where we were actually doing the activity together. And I could talk to her about My Little Pony. And that's kind of where our relationship started, is just slowly in that way, while she was engaging in a preferred activity, we began to build a relationship, just kind of those foundation building blocks. And it wasn't very long before she and I had a pretty good relationship and I could start asking her to do some academic tasks. And not very much at first, and then increasing over time as our relationship built. But by the end of that school year, I would say that we were besties. We had it figured out. And most of the time, because I had a good relationship and a connection with her, I could ask her to do the things that needed to be done and we could get through the day just fine. However, if I was gone from the classroom, which of course I was from time to time, I would get phone calls by about 9 o'clock in the morning saying, I'll never forget the day I was homesick, like sick enough, I'm in bed. And my assistant principal calls and says, I need you to talk to Addison for just a minute. Please just talk to her. And I did, and it helped. And she was able to get through the rest of the day. But she needed that relationship with me. She needed to feel safe. She needed to feel secure in that environment. And then we could build on that and get to the point where we were completing academic tasks that needed to be done, of course. It took a little longer for my paras to get in relationship with her. After I had established a relationship, then another person was able to work on a relationship with her. And over time, we all got to where we had the kind of relationship where we could work with her most of the time. Of course, there were times where that wasn't the case. And if there was something through our day off, that always made it a little more challenging. But building a relationship with her was definitely where we needed to start. And we could really see the payoff in the long run. So I hope that you have a situation like that, where when you start implementing these strategies, that they work and you see the power of them and of building a relationship with your students. You probably already have experienced that. We see students a lot like that in public school, where a student might have a relationship with one adult and they'll do something for them that they wouldn't do for anyone else, because that adult has invested in their life. They've spent the time to build a relationship with them and they trust them. There's a foundation of trust there. So I've had several teachers say that a kid was hard to like, that their personality just didn't get, didn't work with them or whatever. My advice is fake it till you make it. If you have to pretend in the beginning, be a great pretender, boost up on your acting skills, make sure the kids think that you're completely in it, because they'll know if you really are pretending or you're half-hearted about it. They can tell when you really care and you're really showing up for them, and when it's half-hearted. So just keep that in mind. But when you have put the time into the relationship, the great thing is that you might have to put a little more in the beginning as the adult, right? You have to put a little more in to the relationship in the beginning, and before long it is mutual, and you end up that's one of your favorite students that you enjoy working with the most, because you've taken that time to build the relationship. So it goes both ways. And then the essential component of any relationship, and I've kind of already mentioned this, is safety. Think about how you would feel if you were expected to work with someone you didn't trust. It's a whole different feeling than if you've worked on building a relationship and you have trust with someone, and then you're able to work with them to get any task, however big or small. You can move mountains at that point, right? When there's that foundation of trust and relationship. In the next picture, this is a picture of Jenny. Jenny, of course, has similar stories of students that she's worked with. Here's a student that she worked with who had very challenging behaviors. And over time, Jenny was able to build into the kind of relationship where here they are having fun with vampire teeth. And she's able to engage in the iPad, the activity that he enjoys with him. And just a fun example of what that can look like over time. But Jenny, that's not where you started, right?
That is not where we started. When we get our getting a reinforcer training posted, I've told a story about this student, so everyone needs to check that out.
Awesome. So one thing we need to keep in mind is to be intentional about making connections with our students and doing that frequently. There are some teachers who will greet their students at the door with a handshake. Maybe they have a special handshake that they've established with that student, or maybe they have a greeting menu and the student chooses how the teacher's going to greet them for the day. That's a great way to start the day. And it also gives you a quick gauge of how your students are doing today. How are they feeling? How are they responding to you? And then engage with your students in a positive way multiple times throughout the day. The frequency of how we engage with our students is really important. When there's a gap in engagement, as humans, we start to feel like our connection is broken. I know I can feel like that with my friends, or even with my husband or with my children. If I haven't spent a lot of time with them, or we haven't, like if we're really busy and we just haven't had a lot of quality time to really connect, I start to feel like something's missing, like it's not quite right. So find those ways to frequently engage with your students. And then find the good. Every single student has good qualities, every one of them. And that may be hard to find in some of your students at first. You might have to dig a little more, be creative, but they're there. Find them and recognize them. And then be genuine. No one likes fake praise. As adults, we don't like fake praise, and we know when it's not genuine. Kids are the same. They're intuitive and they know when we're being fake. So like I said before, if you have to fake it, brush up on your acting skills and make it convincing. The next point I'd like to make is about follow through. So when it comes to gaining our trust, our follow through really is the key to successfully using positive reinforcement. If you've told the student that they can earn a reinforcer for following a direction, then follow through and give it to them when they've done what you've asked them to do immediately. Be an honest broker. Don't make the mistake of waiting for 5 minutes or 10 minutes or longer. The gold standard for delivering reinforcers is 1 to 3 seconds. And we'll talk about that a little bit more, but it's so important to be consistent and follow through. On the flip side of that, if the student doesn't follow the direction, it's equally as important to follow through by not giving them the reinforcer. It can be very tough, but it's important that you're consistent. All of your classroom staff are consistent with your expectations and with your reinforcement system. The next thing you want to do is to make the challenging behavior ineffective. If the child's used to getting an iPad when they cry, then they're going to keep trying that behavior to get the iPad. Make the crying behavior ineffective. They no longer get the iPad for crying. However, now they'll get the iPad when they sit in the chair or whatever the behavior you're working towards is. This could lead to a longer period of crying in the beginning because they're going to see if you'll give in. But if you remain committed and you stick with it, you'll see results. But a little bit of a caveat for that. If you wait for 20 minutes and then you give in because you're tired of hearing the crying, it's going to be much harder next time. And they'll probably cry even longer because they're going to wait to see if you're going to give in again. So just keep in mind that you're going to spend a lot of time waiting in the beginning, but it's worth it. If you stick it out, the behavior will start to decrease in your duration, and they'll start to understand that what they need to do to get what you're asked, to get the reinforcer that you're offering. It's also really important to prioritize and pick your battles. We can't choose everything, even though we would like to, right? Can't fix everything or change everything all at once. What's the most important thing for your student to learn? Start there and pick your battles. And Jenny will talk more about this in a little bit and explain the way we sometimes prioritize behaviors. So I won't get into that, but it's just so important. If it's academic work, or maybe it's working on a toileting routine so they can be more independent and access other environments in your building, or maybe it's sitting in a chair so that they can start to begin with those beginning basic learning skills. What's going to have the biggest impact on your student's success? And that's where you need to start. And last but not least, we do not want to force students physically to do anything. We want to motivate them to do the things with good things. And forcing students is not very effective, first of all. It doesn't promote independence, and it really destroys that relationship and that foundation of trust that we're trying to build with them. So make this part of your class motto. In this classroom, doing good things gets you good things. Here are a few pro tips for positive reinforcement, and I've mentioned some of these briefly, so we'll go through them kind of quickly, but pick your battles. I really can't say that enough. We have to prioritize and focus on those priorities. That's not where you have to stay. You'll be able to pick something else and move on later, but start by choosing the most important skill. And then give your payment quickly. The quicker you can deliver a reinforcement after the student engages in the behavior, the more effective your reinforcement's going to be. If the student's completed their end of the deal, but then they have to wait for you to provide the payment or the reinforcers, that hurts your credibility. Again, it breaks down that trust and relationship that you're working to build. And you might end up reinforcing a negative behavior instead if you wait too long. Remember, the optimal time frame for delivering reinforcers is 1 to 3 seconds, so the quicker the better. Be mentally present. We've talked about this a little bit already, but kids are more likely to want to engage with adults that they think are invested in them and like them, and having fun and socializing with them is one way to do that. I'll just mention that often the staff members who are supervising on the playground, often they're not really present with the kids. They may be looking at their phone and maybe visiting with another staff member, but that's a great time to really connect and be present with your students. So find those times. And then we're going to separate the work into quick, easy activities, small chunks of work, because we want students to be successful. So we'll give them a small task that they can be successful at and reinforce that behavior. You can always add on and build up to the amount of work that you want them to do or the complexity of work that you want by starting small. And then Jenny mentioned our friends over at the Arkansas Behavior Support Specialist Group. They also have a video on building relationships, and that's linked in our resources and survey document for this training. All right, so I mentioned some quick, easy activities that you could do with students to quickly reinforce, and it's not where you're wanting to end up, but it's a place to start. And so that's what we're going to talk about next. If you think about a challenging student that you want to teach positive reinforcement to, so you want to start start this, you want them to understand what the positive reinforcement means, that when they do good things, they get good things. Here's a good way to start. You can start with quick activities that can help with following directions and build on that trust that you're working on. The students doing the activity, they're getting a reinforcer quickly. They're not getting it for free. It's not bribery. They're still having to do something to get the reinforcer. And this is a great place to start. You're not going to stay here, but it's a great place to start. So here are some examples of one-step directions. Some of them are motor imitation skills, others are receptive listening skills. Some students will be able to do these things, these one-step academic tasks. For others, you're going to need to expand it. Maybe you can extend it to two-step directions. Just keep in mind with these examples that quick and easy will look different for each student. So here are some ideas. You can tell the student, do this, and you're clapping your hands or whatever it is. It doesn't matter what it is, do this, but you're asking them to do something. It's a motor imitation skill. You can do something similar. You can do the same, ask them to do the same thing that you're doing. You can ask them to copy me. There's kind of some other verbiage for a similar task. Walk with me. That's a great one for those young kids that you're trying to get just in relationship with you. Receptive listening skills, walk with me. That's something that's a great functional skill to teach. Put in, maybe you're asking them to put something in. Maybe they're cleaning up the crayons and you're wanting them to put them in the bag or whatever it is. Touch your nose, another receptive listening example. And then here are some that are getting a little more, increasing a little bit in difficulty. You're asking them to point to the number. Maybe you're saying point to the number 8. And so you're asking them to do that, or write your name, or give them some other two-step direction. And just a little note for the secondary level teachers, you might use positive reinforcement to remind your students of classroom rules. So coming back from a break, or even if they're changing classes every class period when they come into the classroom, especially at the beginning of the year, you might play a quick game with them and ask them about the expectations in your classroom. Or you could do a quick game to start the class where you ask easy questions about the content from the previous class period. And maybe you're throwing out Jolly Ranchers to those students who are giving you correct answers, or the ones who are at least attempting to answer. And that strategy could work at any grade level, but I've seen that be successful in a high school classroom, actually. So these ideas are quick. We want to get students moving in a positive direction and establish our relationship with them. Could be at the beginning of a class period or the beginning of a work session. Get started with something easy and quick to get that going.
Now let's look at implementing positive reinforcement. We have some strategies that we would like to share that will help you on your positive reinforcement journey. So here on the slide, we have Tommy. As Daylene said, we are going to talk about how to narrow down your focus on what to prioritize first. So here with Tommy, we have some significant undesired behaviors. So he has yelling, hitting, wadding up paper, stomping out of class, and saying bad words. So his teacher made that list for us, and she's wanting to target all of those behaviors with positive reinforcement. You can, those are all things that we can target with positive reinforcement, but we do not want to target all of those at once. Depending on your newness level of working with positive reinforcement, you might want to start with 1 or 2. I would not focus on more than 3 at a time because it gets tricky for everyone to remember what's going on. So when I looked at this list to decide what I would start with, I wanted to start with the behaviors that are the most dangerous or unsafe. So I'm looking at hitting because that's physical aggression, and that is a concern for the safety of other students in the class or adults. And I'm looking at stomping out of class because that's a safety concern for Tommy. When he leaves the classroom, I can't see him anymore. I don't know if he's going to run out of the building, if he's going to get into the street. I have no idea where he is. So having eyes on Tommy, someone knowing where Tommy is, what he's doing is really important for his safety. Now, I see saying bad words on there, and I know if you're a classroom teacher and you have a student saying bad words, you're getting phone calls from other parents. I'm not saying that's not important. It very much is, but with the other high levels of behaviors we have on here, the aggressive and the elopement, those are the two we really need to start with for student safety. So I hear you. I know you're going to get phone calls. You are going to work on that, but you want to work on getting these other two under control before you move on to those other undesired behaviors. So we've collected data, and Tommy is hitting his friends when he wants them to go away. So what are we going to do? We're going to teach him a replacement behavior. And we're going to tell Tommy, if he doesn't want his friends to be by him, he can say, no, thank you. You can say, not right now. The exact phrase isn't important. You're going to pick something that works for Tommy. But you want to make sure you're teaching him a replacement. And when he does use that replacement, you need to make sure you're following it up with positive reinforcement. So we're working on hitting and stomping out of class first. Okay, so once you've figured out your target behaviors, you need to talk or think about your rate of reinforcement. So if you're teaching a new skill or a difficult skill, you might want to start with one-to-one reinforcement. And so what that means is after each followed direction or completed task, desired behavior, whatever it is, you are going to provide access to a reinforcer. So let's look at some examples. I'm going to use the quick, easy examples that Daleen talked about. So let's say we are going to do our first trial on do this and we're modeling. The first thing we do is we get out our choice board or our container and we ask the child what they want to work for so that they have some motivation. So they've picked out their item and then we say, do this, and they do it. So we give them their chosen reinforcer and they chose gummy bears. So for a second trial, we're going to have them choose again. And then we are going to say, oh, we're not modeling it, sorry. We're going to say touch nose, and they do it. And we're going to give them their reinforcer, gummy bears again. So for a third trial, we have them choose. And maybe this time he chooses a toy truck because he's had 4 gummy bears and he's tired of those. We all get tired of things, and that's okay. That's why we want to give choices. And we say point to number or point to the number or point to the 8. And they point to the number and they get their reinforcer. He got a dump truck. So as I said, this is great for your beginning steps. We don't want to stay here forever. You don't want to stay in one-to-one reinforcement for a long time. It takes a lot of time and energy out of your day. But also it's not good for students to stay in one-to-one reinforcement for a long time. You want to take as long as the student needs, but then you want to quickly move on to extending to add in more work tasks before they receive reinforcement. So they're going to be doing more work and they're going to be having less time with the reinforcer. And Daleen is going to talk about a strategy for extending the number of trials they're doing.
Yes, so a great strategy for expanding beyond one-to-one reinforcement is a token board. So a token board is just a visual representation of how much work is done, how much is left, how close the student is getting to what they're working for, and it includes what they're working for. This doesn't have to be fancy. You all have probably seen some version of a token board, or sometimes we call it a penny board if we're using pennies as a token. It can be made with a piece of paper and some Velcro. A laminated piece of cardstock with Velcro works fantastic, and that's a great place to start. You can make it work for you. So I'm just going to go through real quick how a token board works, and then we'll go through some ideas of getting beyond pennies even and further into it. So first of all, the student chooses what they want to work for. Let's say we're working with Tommy and he's chosen a gummy bear. So we're going to put a picture of a gummy bear on his token board so he knows that's what he's working for. Then you're going to give the student a task or a direction, like point to the letter T. When he does it, I might say something like, wow, look at how fast you found the T, penny on, and give him a penny to put on his board. And then we're going to repeat this 4 more times with whatever tasks are appropriate for this student until he's earned all 5 pennies. At first, I'm going to keep them quick and easy tasks, right? So that he can, like some of those things that we were talking about earlier, and maybe I'll incorporate it with finding the letters of his name or something else that we're working on as well. So when he's earned all 5 pennies, I say something like, look, all the pennies are on. How many do you have? And then we quickly count the pennies and give him the gummy bear. I want to caution you not to get stuck on the counting piece. It's great if the student can take the pennies off and count them to you quickly and then get the reinforcer. That's ultimately what we want. But we don't want to get stuck there. If they've already earned the reinforcer, we don't want to make counting the pennies a condition that they have to complete before they get the reinforcer that they've already earned. We want to be an honest broker. So, like I said, counting the pennies is great for cardinality, for that one-to-one correspondence, for counting, that practice. So it doesn't hurt, but that's not a requirement that they do it. Maybe you quickly count them at first when you're teaching it, or maybe you are able to point to the pennies and they take them off real quick and give them to you and you count out loud. Whatever that involvement for that student looks like, just don't get hung up on the counting, even though it's great and you eventually want to get there. And then with a token board, keep in mind the student's still getting a reinforcer after each response, but the reinforcer is now what? It's the penny, right? It's the token that they're getting. They have to earn a certain amount of tokens before they can trade them in for the really good things, the high reinforcer that they've chosen, in this case, the gummy bear. So a quick strategy that you can use if a student isn't quite ready for 5 pennies, maybe that's too many, maybe 5 tokens is too much to start with when you're teaching how to use the token board. You can use a smaller amount of tokens. We call it preloading. Maybe you put 3 pennies on the board and they earn the last 2. Or if you're starting with a student and you really think it's going to take them some time to work up to understanding the penny board, maybe you put 4 on and they earn the last 1. And then they get the reinforcer that they've chosen. Then maybe you're able to put 3 pennies on and they earn the last 2, and so on until eventually they're earning all of them. For some students, that process is going to take a little longer than for others, and that's okay. You know your students and you're going to start where you need to have them be successful. You can always increase the amount of tokens needed as you go. Another way to increase academic endurance and build up to get to even past 5 tokens, because we don't want to stop at 5. It's a great place to be, but we want to keep going, is something like this example you see on the screen, where there are 12 boxes. It's just a simple dry erase card. They're putting smiley faces in the boxes when the students completed the task. So they're working, we're expanding that out. There's more time between that they're working for that token, the object that they've chosen, the reinforcer. So you're extending the amount of time that they can work and the number of tokens, or in this case, it was smiley faces that they're working for. Here's another great example. This is a picture of an iPad and it's been cut into 8 pieces. And instead of earning a token, the student earns a piece of the iPad. And when the puzzle is all put together, so to speak, or the picture of the iPad is complete, they've earned their time with that item, with that iPad. And so that's something else that works really well with a lot of students. And you can cut that up. You can start with 3 pieces. You could, print a new picture and now cut it up into 5 pieces and then 8 pieces or whatever. But you can use that even to expand the amount of work that they're doing before they earn the reinforcement. And Jenny mentioned giving students choices. Sometimes we all get tired of working for the same thing, right? Over and over. And we like to have choices. I don't know about you, but I keep a few treats on my desk, keep Jolly Ranchers and mints and some different things on my desk. And I don't want it to be the same every day. Sometimes I'm looking for something different. So our students are the same. They want a variety a lot of times. Some of them do not, that there are exceptions to that rule. But often they do like a variety. And so we want to present different options for them. There are many ways to do that. It doesn't have to be fancy. The picture you see on the screen is some Ziploc baggies with little reinforcers in there. I see goldfish and raisins, maybe M&Ms. So you can use those as a choice. But also one thing about that is you're prepared ahead of time. So you have the reinforcers ready to go, and that is key. These little jewelry and bead boxes work great for small edibles. You can put things like Skittles, M&Ms, pieces of gummy bears, pieces of gummy worms, marshmallows, dry cereal, and more in there. Here's an example of a choice wheel or a choice board where you can put the choices that are available, a picture of the choices that are available, and students can select from those choices. Just keep in mind that that needs to be things that are available and that you're okay with the student using at that time. If they don't have time to go swing on the swing right now, for example, then you wouldn't include that as a reinforcer if that's not one that's available in the moment. So just make sure that you switch out the pictures for what you do have. Here's an example of a box or a tub method. That works great for having the actual items that the students can go through and choose from. And we do need to rotate those items out from time to time or even from day to day, depending on your students. We can sometimes use a written list for students who can read or for older students. You could also add photos or pictures to that to transition students from pictures to a list. Just keep in mind to use something that is developmentally and age appropriate for your students as well. One note about choosing reinforcers too, we often hear things like what works during one learning session to motivate a student didn't work the next time, or that student didn't want anything badly enough to work for it. Just keep in mind what Jenny said earlier, every student has reinforcers. We just have to get creative about finding them and sometimes get creative about how we offer them to students so that we can figure out what they like and will work for. All right, a few pro tips. We've talked about these a little bit, so we'll go quickly. But one of them is to target behaviors. Make sure you set the expectation for what you want the student to do in clear, concise terms and give them a token when they meet that expectation. And then two, tokens can be anything. I mentioned we'd go beyond pennies earlier. Some teachers are afraid that their students will put pennies in their mouth and choke on them, which is a very real concern, and that would definitely be something that you want to prevent. So use something bigger like big buttons or poker chips. The top of Gatorade lid bottles can work really well. Use whatever works for your student. If you have a student who needs something more 3D that's easier for them to pick up and physically grasp, you could use blocks even. Get creative. It doesn't have to be something that like a penny or whatever. Use student choice like we've been talking about. We want them to be able to choose what they're working for, and then allow the student to put the token on the board themselves if they can, and when that's possible once you've taught that. It's not necessary, and don't make it a power struggle for sure, because you just want to use the strategy of the token board. But if students can put it on, that's a good thing to allow them to do. It also increases buy-in. It's ownership, it's theirs when they're able to use the token board as independently as possible. And then finally, staff consistency. Be sure that all of the adults in the classroom are using the token boards consistently. This might sound cliche, but consistency is the key to success. So make sure that you've taught any other staff members in your classroom, and even those related service providers that students may leave the classroom to see, or if they're rotating and they see several different teachers, make sure that everyone knows what their reinforcement system is and how to use it.
Let's look at some additional strategies to support implementing positive reinforcement. So we have four different areas we want to look at. We're going to look at limiting access, being clear and concise, being timely with your reinforcement, and rotate. And we have mentioned several of these as we've gone through the training. So as Daylene's been doing, I'm just going to quickly recap these. So the first thing we want to look at is limiting access. Think about why some things in your life are special. I remember the first time I tried Ghirardelli dark chocolate salted caramel squares. I'd never had them before, and I thought they were the best thing that I'd ever tasted. I ate almost the entire bag in one day, sadly. And the next day, I didn't even want to look at the bag. So they weren't valuable to me anymore the next day because I had unlimited access the first day. So you want to make sure that things are limited so that they become more valuable. Another example could be Girl Scout cookies. You can only get Girl Scout cookies once a year. I have some Girl Scout cookies in my kitchen right now. And so they're really exciting because you can't get them any other time of year. So we want to make sure we're keeping those reinforcers special so that students will want to do their work for them. They have to be worth working for. And limiting access is one way to help make them special. Some pro tips. Use a storage system that works for you. You can use clear containers. You can use cabinet space, anything that you have in your classroom. The key is that you want to keep trying different things until you find what works for you. And sometimes your students will play a part in that. So I had a student who liked to climb. And when he entered my classroom, I had just been storing items on the top shelf of a cabinet. Well, he would find a way to climb up and grab things off of that cabinet. So while he was in my class, I had to store items in a different way. So make sure that you're thinking about those kind of possibilities too when you're planning for storage. You want to use guided access for technology. That was a life changer for me in the classroom. If a student chooses an iPad, you can go in, set up guided access. And when their time is up, it will basically turn the iPad off. I mean, it's still on, but it says this iPad is locked, you know, whatever. Usually they'll just put it down and move on to something else because they can't do anything on it. So definitely check that out if you don't know how to do it. We have a video tutorial on our website under training videos and tutorials. You want to make sure that you are limiting time. It's important, like I said earlier, that students don't have free reign access to the item that they earned. Limiting that time will help make it more special. Like I said earlier, you want to consider those behaviors. When I had my climber, I had to store items in a different way than I had previously. And you want to make sure it's out of reach. If they can go get the item without you, they're not going to come to you. They're going to go get it themselves because that's easier for them. So now let's look at being clear and concise. So your tone, your facial expression, and your body posture says a lot. They all need to match the words that are coming out of your mouth. Most experts would agree that 70 to 93% of communication is nonverbal. So even if we look at the low end at 70%, that means that our tone of voice and our facial expression and our gestures and our posture, those are speaking way louder than our words. So make sure that all of those match the message that you're sending across, because that all of these matching helps it be clear to your students, and clear is kind. If you're saying one thing, but your face is saying something else, that's not clear. That's confusing. All right, so some pro tips. Contrast your voice. So you should sound pleasant and excited when you're giving praise. So, woohoo, you did it, way to go. But if a student doesn't respond in a desired way, instead of saying, no, not like that, or I already know, I know you know how to do this, perhaps you would say, let's try again. Your voice is firm, it's neutral, you're not upset, but you're going to do this before we move on. You want to use visual supports. We have an entire training on visuals and how important they are to classroom success. So make sure you have those visual supports out. That helps make things clear for students. You want to get on their level. So get close to them and down on their level before you give a direction. If you're at the secondary level, maybe you squat down next to their desk. And you want to be specific when you are giving praise. So when you give your reinforcer, you want to pair that with praise and social interaction. That is how we're helping create interest and interest in social interaction and praise. Sometimes kids don't care about that at all, but if we pair it with the item that they really like, they start to care about it and they start to like those two things. So when you're giving that specific praise, you want to be very specific. So instead of just saying, good job, great job, way to go, you want to tell them exactly what they did right. So I love that you pushed in your chair, here's a Skittle, or whatever that the task is that they completed. So eventually our goal is we can fade out some of those Skittles and we can just say, I love how you walked in line down the hallway, high five. And they find that motivating. However, we do not want to fade out all reinforcers. Those are still important to the student. They're still important to you as a teacher. Reinforcers increase your value to the student. So you want to keep those going. We want to fade out to not giving them as often as we've talked about. We don't want to stay at 1-on-1 forever. We don't want to stay at 1 to 5 forever, but they are still important. So don't ever fade them totally out. So let's look at being timely. So if you wait a long time between when they finish the task and when you provide the reinforcer, you risk reinforcing a challenging behavior. So here's an example. The student raised his hand. Instead of yelling out, he did the replacement behavior and you are so excited. This kid loves stickers. So you run over to your filing cabinet and you're filing through, trying to find your sticker page. And it takes you a minute, minute and a half to find your stickers. While your back is turned, the student that just earned the sticker threw a pencil across the classroom and hit another student in the head. And so you didn't see that because your back was turned. You turn around and you go give this kid a sticker for raising his hand. But the last thing he did was throw a pencil and hit a kid in the head. So you just inadvertently reinforced throwing a pencil and hitting a kid in the head. You didn't mean to, but you didn't have your items ready. So it's really important that you are prepared. Daleen said it earlier, and you have those items ready to go. That gold standard 1 to 3 seconds, you want to get that item right over to them so that they pair that desired behavior with getting their reinforcer, because that's what we want to happen. So a pro tip, be prepared. I know Daleen and I have both said that multiple times, but it really is vital for positive reinforcement. So if you're doing the iPad, you want to make sure you either have the video or the game, whatever it is, queued up and ready to go before you start working with them. And then you want to give your payment quickly. I don't think it's bad to hear 1 to 3 seconds as a goal again, because that is also vital to positive reinforcement. And now we are going to look at rotating items. You've all heard the saying, I'm sure, absence makes the heart grow fonder. It's increasing the value of something, kind of like how I talked about that chocolate earlier or Girl Scout cookies. So rotating in your new rotating items can help keep items fresh and make them more valuable. It can also help you discover new reinforcers potentially. Not all kids will be able to do this. You'll have some kids that they'll only do work for the iPad or a dump truck. So if you have that student, we're not saying to rotate that item out. If it's possible for the student, it's a great idea to rotate. If you can't, you do what you can with what you have. Oh, I got ahead of myself. So here are some pro tips on rotating. You want to store your unused items so they're not accessible. You want to make sure that you're presenting new items multiple times, 3, 4, 5 times at least. Sometimes the first 4 times they will act like they don't even see it, but the 5th time they're like, oh, look at this. This is the coolest thing I've ever seen. So make sure that you're giving multiple opportunities. With some students, like I said, you may not be able to rotate that reinforcer, and that's okay. And you want to save those super powerful reinforcers for more difficult tasks. So if they really like the iPad and the rest of the stuff is just moderately motivating to them, you want to save that iPad for the most, like your target. So if it's toilet training, you want to save the iPad for toilet training. If it's doing math, say if it's a kid that is working on academics and they really like reading, so it's not a challenge for them behaviorally, and they hate math, they don't even want to go sit at the math table, you want to save the iPad for math time. So be strategic in how you're using their really powerful reinforcers.
Okay, I'm going to finish up, but I had thought of one quick little thing that I do want to mention. We've mentioned edible reinforcers several times, and sometimes we'll talk to people who say, but I don't want to feed them all day. Like they don't want to use edible reinforcement. Just a quick note for why we suggest that, especially in the beginning. You're giving reinforcement quickly and frequently when you're teaching, for one, when you're building a relationship and building trust with a student, but when you're teaching a new reinforcement system. So you're giving reinforcement quickly, and an M&M or a Skittle or a gummy bear, those are things that are consumable. They go away, right, pretty quickly. Whereas if you have to get out the dump truck or the iPad or let the student have time to draw because that's their reinforcer. If you have to do that each time, that takes up a lot more time than a quick edible reinforcer. So that's one reason why we suggest using edible reinforcers if it's reinforcing for your student. That's of course important, but it's because they're quick and consumable and they do go away